I can't figure out neurologic stuff in people, I'm going to always get a prodrome scan. Exosomes are called to places where there's active destruction, inflammation. They can cross the blood-brain barrier, so when they're small enough, well, there's a lot of flaws to the elastic regression theory of aging that are coming out. Whether you look at a normal brain or an Alzheimer's brain, in fact, a normal brain can have even more plaque and phosphorylated tau than an Alzheimer's brain. So you're doing the things that are hormonally related.
Welcome to our Q&A highlights. Q&A sessions are recorded every month, and our enhanced members get an exclusive opportunity to ask questions from one of cellular medicine's brightest minds, Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. Get a chance to ask your questions by becoming our enhanced member at bli.academy/memberships. You also get access to our content library full of tips, articles, videos, lectures, previous live Q&A sessions, and more.
Maria from Florida asks, what are your thoughts on injections or IVs of exosomes for anti-aging purposes, assuming you are optimized otherwise? I'm a fan. I think exosomes are going to have more and more power. We're learning more and more about them. I think when you look at targeting them IV, exosomes are called to places where there's active destruction, inflammation. They can cross the blood-brain barrier. So when they're small enough, one of the few things that's small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier, I think you can do a lot. You're going to encourage cell communication, tissue repair signals, stem cell function, immune modulation. You're going to get senescent cell clearance with them. I'm a fan. I know we don't have all the data yet, but I think the data is trending pretty well. COVID did a huge problem to here. We're still trying to figure it out, but it does appear that the spike protein has gotten into the scalp follicles and continues to cause hair shedding. So COVID is a big cause. So you're doing the things that are hormonally related. You're trying to block DHT with spironolactone and with minoxidil, right? So you're blocking DHT. If that's not working, you're still hair shedding. You look at inflammation. You look at nutrient deficiencies, make sure there's ample of all the nutrients. So I would always run a micronutrient panel to make sure my micronutrients up to par, especially zinc, B vitamins, all those really important. Think about autoimmunity that could have been triggered by COVID, but autoimmune diseases in general. You're always going to work on blood flow issues. So you're going to work on trying to improve endothelial function because the hair needs hair follicles need a lot of blood flow. That's why we use like scalp massages and things like that. But you need a lot of blood flow to the hair follicles. Always work on mitochondrial function. Anything that's moving fast needs a lot of mitochondria, as does hair. Look at chronic stress. Chronic stress, cortisol levels always going to be playing a role here too. So basically, most of these studies use something called the elastic regression theory of aging. Well, there's a lot of flaws to the elastic regression theory of aging that are coming out. It assumes that there's linear aging. There's not linear aging, okay? There was also, when you looked at the predictive ability of these tests, it was plus or minus 10 years. That's not very useful when people are like, wow, I just, got 5 years difference. I'm like, okay, well, the margin of error actually is 10 years. So that's not very useful to me. We also one of the big problems is that we really don't know what should be happening to methylation markers as we age. So what we've said is that, okay, these are the methylation markers of a young person. If we age and they're different, we want them to look the same as the young person. That may well not be true, right? That healthy aging may depend on a shift in methylation markers. And so we're failing to account for like the biologic complexities, the repair mechanisms that need to occur with us as we age. Just like we shouldn't be the same person as we were when we were 20, neither should our cells be the same as when we were 20. Changes have had to occur to accommodate to every stressor I've had. Lori asks, what do I think of the relatively new phosphorylated tau blood test for Alzheimer, or the p-tau GFAP NFL panel called BrainScan that Dr. Bredeson's offering, especially those with a close family history? Okay, I'm going to be controversial here, Lori, because I know that Dr. Bredesen loves that test and is really pushing it. And so Dr. Goodnow's done a lot of work with looking at phosphorylated tau and looking at amyloid plaque. And the problem is that whether you look at a normal brain or an Alzheimer's brain, in fact, a normal brain can have even more plaque and phosphorylated tau than an Alzheimer's brain. I think this is one of my colleagues loves to always talk about this correlation versus causation. And I think this is where we've confused this, because phosphorylated tau appears to be a cellular stress response and is likely there to try and initiate neural repair, right? So there's something damaging neurons. Now my body's trying to heal it. And then I measure it. I go, oh, this must be the cause because it's high in everybody who has Alzheimer's, right? So it must be the cause when actually it was coming into play to attempt neural repair. It's very well known to be part of the brain's defense system. It's sort of similar to like an acute phase protein. So basically, what we know, for instance, if you measure it right after a brain injury, it gets very high, right? Well, the body's trying to repair after the brain injury. We know it increases with exercise. So is exercise bad for us because we're making more p-tau? No, p-tau is there because it's an inflammatory phase reaction, just like the other inflammatory phase reactants that are trying to heal you. And it's one of the reasons exercise is good, is because you get this anti-inflammatory response, somewhat dictated by things like p-tau. It also rises during sleep. So if you measure at night sleeping, why is it higher then? Because sleep is a repair phase. It's when our body's trying to heal things. So basically, when you look at these things, we know that probably are oxidative stress responses that are trying to help us. And that instead of saying they're the harmful thing because it correlates, it's unlikely the cause. Now, am I 100% certain on this? No, but there's a lot of data to support that. And I know Dr. Goodenow, who studies Alzheimer's extensively, is very much of this belief. So when we're focusing on these things like p-tau and amyloid plaque, we're focusing on the wrong thing. And we need to focus on the root causes, which is metabolic health, inflammation control, vascular function, mitochondrial function, and plasmalogens. Dystonia, abnormal, tone, tone. So abnormal muscle tone. We'll see this lots of times after neurologic injuries. You'll see it after strokes or brain injuries where the muscles go into spasm, right? The muscles are contracting too much. So if my muscle is just contracting too much and I'm trying to do something right, it doesn't work very right. Or even holding something, sometimes my muscle will seize up. Neurotransmitter imbalances, dopamine, for instance, low dopamine is going to create an issue. Mitochondrial dysfunction. Remember, mitochondria are what create muscle energy. And when there's dysfunction to the mitochondria and they're spilling out calcium, then this injury to mitochondria, we spill out this calcium and my muscles will go into tonic states. So dystonia, tonic states can be done by calcium overload when the mitochondria are injured. Copper zinc imbalance is an easy thing to look at. So you can look at copper and zinc levels. Those need to be balanced. I always if I can't figure out neurologic stuff in people, I'm going to always get a prodrome scan. Because if we're starting to see dysfunction in the lipid, so that make up your cell membrane and your neurons, we're starting to see loss of sphingomyelin, so the myelin that's coating your nerves is getting diminished, then we really have to focus on replacing plasmalogens. For those of you who don't know what post-exertional malaise is, because I know you kind of think, well, I have that too. I exercise and I'm tired. PEM is a lot more serious than just getting tired after exercise. So basically, it's delayed onset, 12 to 27 hours after exertion. It's very unpredictable in terms of severity. So sometimes it's really bad, sometimes not so bad. It's a very prolonged recovery. And it's not just fatigue. People describe a really just profound exhaustion. So like 12 hours after exercise, they are just in bed, right? And a lot of brain fog associated with that, muscle weakness. They get more pain, they get flu-like symptoms. So it's bad. They can even get autonomic disruptions where they'll have like POTS type syndromes. So basically, not a good thing, right? Triggers are usually physical exertion, but even in some people, mental exertion can cause it. So what is the underlying problem? Well, underlying is almost always mitochondrial dysfunction. Number one, this is a problem with mitochondria, right? And I have completely and utterly exhausted my ATP to the point where I am dead, right? My brain's not working, my heart's not working, my muscles aren't working. And I have to let the gas tank fill back up, which takes another 25 hours or 30 hours, right? So when we exercise, yes, we always deplete some ATP, but we should be able to replenish it rapidly. If you can't, this is what's going to happen. How do we look at mitochondrial function? It's a little harder, right? We like the prodrome scan because Dr. Dane Goodenow designed the prodrome scan for us to look at organ systems a little bit, or I would say cellular systems, not organ systems, cellular systems like mitochondria, peroxisomes, methyltransferase systems. So we can look at the lipids that make up the mitochondria and see if those are disrupted. That can give us some clues, right? But lots of times I'll just go after trying to see if I treat mitochondrial dysfunction, will I be able to help that person? He asked, what are your thoughts on using doxycycline, cycling it for its potential benefits in longevity and overall health? So interestingly, you guys, there's a couple of antibiotics, doxycycline and azithromycin, that have been well shown to be actually longevity agents. Now, we wouldn't want to be on antibiotic continuously. Obviously, it would mess up our gut. But used in a cyclical fashion, they actually will do some really amazing things. So doxycycline particularly stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis, it has senolytic properties, It inhibits what's called matrix metalloproteinase, which is a bad thing, and arthritis and a lot of other diseases. It has anti-inflammatory effects. What are the risks? Microbiome disruption. It can be autoimmune triggering. This is one of my scariest things to me about doxycycline. And nobody cautions you about this, but doxycycline is very linked to an autoimmune hepatitis. So I'm cautious about it. Probably more cautious than I should be because I was experienced it myself, right? So I think you need to be a little bit careful. It also causes some collagen synthesis impact, right? And then the GI issues. Cons of azithromycin over doxycycline, weaker senolytic effects, little less mitochondrial support. It can prolong QT intervals, so I would be careful in somebody with any kind of cardiac history with azithromycin. So you're going to kind of choose. If somebody has an autoimmune propensity, they already don't have a healthy gut, they burn every time they go in the sun, stay away from doxycycline. If somebody has a lot of cardiac stuff, then maybe you want to go to doxycycline or azithromycin.